Chapter 47, Slow Burn Again. The helicopter ride back to Zurich from the mountain inn should have been a victory lap. The sun was glinting off the glaciers, and for the first time in my life, I was a married man. The gold band on my finger felt heavier than the Blackwood signet ring I had discarded, a constant, grounding reminder that I finally belonged to someone. But the message from Marcus was a cold current beneath the surface. A package from the fourth partner. I looked at Maya. She was staring out the window of the chopper, her wildflower bouquet resting in her lap, her white silk dress glowing in the morning light. She looked like a dream I hadn't earned, yet she was the one who had signed the papers. She was the one who had claimed me. "You're doing it again," she said, her voice barely audible over the thrum of the rotors. She didn't turn around, but she sensed my eyes on her. "The steward is calculating the distance to the next threat." "It's a habit, Maya. Habits don't die just because you say, 'I do.' We're supposed to be on our honeymoon, Alexander. For the next 7 days, there are no threats, only us." She finally turned, her hazel eyes searching mine with a mixture of tenderness and a warning. "Whatever Marcus has can wait until we reach the hotel." He said it was from a fourth partner. Eris said there were only 3. Maya went still. The sterling fire flickered in her gaze. 3 people destroyed my father. If there's a fourth, I want to know who it is before I order breakfast. The helicopter landed on the rooftop of the Bor au Lac. Marcus was waiting by the elevator, a small, weathered wooden box in his hands. He looked like he hadn't slept, but his expression wasn't one of panic. It was one of profound, hushed reverence. "Sir, Mrs. Blackwood Sterling," Marcus said, bowing his head slightly. "This was delivered to the New York office by a courier from a law firm that has been defunct since 1998. The instructions were to deliver it only upon the public release of the mapping code." Alexander took the box. It smelled of old cedar and lab chemicals, the scent of my childhood and Maya's. We went down to our suite. Alexander set the box on the marble table. I stood back, letting Maya be the one to open it. This was her legacy. I was just the witness. Maya lifted the lid. Inside was a single black-and-white photograph and a handwritten letter. She picked up the photo. It was a picture of the original 1994 lab team. My father, Arthur Blackwood, stood on the left, looking young and arrogant. Her father, Arthur Sterling, was in the center, laughing. Eris Thorne was in the background, already looking like a ghost. But there was a woman in the middle. She was young, wearing a lab coat, her arms linked with both Arthur's. She was radiant, her eyes filled with the same brilliant fire I saw in Maya every day. "Clara," Maya whispered. "Clara Vance, my mother's sister." "Your aunt?" I asked, stepping closer. "I thought your mother was an only child." "That's what I was told. My father never spoke of her. After my mother died, her name was erased from the house." Maya opened the letter. Her breath hitched as she read the elegant, looping script. "To the one who finishes the map." The room was never meant to be owned. It was meant to be shared. The 3 men you know, the thief, the genius, and the traitor, they forgot that the fourth partner was the heart. I am the one who kept the original prototype. Not the code, but the physical interface. The one that doesn't require a bridge. If you have released the truth, you are ready for the source. I am in the valley of Verzaska. Come find the heart before the ghosts do. See Maya set the letter down, her hands shaking. She's alive. The fourth partner isn't a villain, Alexander. She's the one who saved the soul of the science. I looked at the letter, then at the photograph. I felt a surge of the old protective instinct, but I suppressed it. We go to Verzaska, but not as a CEO and a consultant, and not today. Maya looked up at me, confused. What do you mean? I mean that for the last month, our entire relationship has been a series of tactical maneuvers. We've been locked in, we've been rescuing, we've been dismantling. We haven't actually dated, Maya. We haven't spent a single day where the world wasn't ending. I walked over to her and took the letter from her hand, setting it back in the box. We go to Verzeska in 48 hours, but for the next 2 days, I want to start over. A slow burn, Maya. No private jets. No security details inside the room. I want to take you to dinner. I want to walk through a park. I want to earn the right to be your husband without a crisis to prove it. Maya stared at me, a slow, beautiful smile spreading across her face. A slow burn, huh? You think you can handle the pace, Mr. Blackwood? I'm a consultant now, I reminded her, pulling her into my arms. I have all the time in the world. Maya POV. The slow burn started with breakfast on the balcony. There were no tablets, no phones. Alexander had instructed Marcus to intercept everything. We sat in the cool Swiss morning, drinking coffee and eating pastries from a local bakery. Alexander was wearing a simple gray sweater, his hair messy, his eyes focused entirely on me. It was terrifying. Without the noise of the board or the threat of Sado, I realized how little I knew about the man behind the suits. I knew his coffee order. I knew his tactical style. I knew the way he sounded when he was desperate. But I didn't know his favorite book. I didn't know what he dreamed about when he wasn't dreaming of acquisitions. Tell me something true, I said, leaning my chin on my hand. Something that isn't in a file. Alexander looked at his coffee, a ghost of a smile on his lips. When I was 10, I tried to run away, not from the house, but from the name. I made it as far as the Port Authority in Manhattan with $20 and a backpack full of comic books. I thought I could disappear and become a normal kid. What happened? My mother's security team found me in 20 minutes. She didn't yell. She didn't even mention it. She just sat me down the next morning and gave me my first lesson in risk management. She told me that a Blackwood never runs because there's nowhere the name can't find you. He looked up at me, his gray eyes soft. I spent the next 24 years proving her right, until I met you. You're the first person who made me realize that running isn't the same as leaving. Sometimes you have to leave the room to find the world. I reached across the table and took his hand. Well, you left the room, Alexander. Welcome to the world. The rest of the day was a revelation. We walked through the old town, lost in the labyrinth of cobblestone streets. We stood on the Munsterbrook and watched the river. We didn't talk about the Sterling IP or the fourth partner. We talked about architecture, about the history of the city, about the fact that we both hated the taste of truffles but felt pressured to pretend we liked them at galas. As the sun began to set, the tension shifted. It was no longer the sharp, aggressive friction of our early days. It was a slow, pulsing heat. The slow burn was doing its job. Every time his hand brushed mine, every time he leaned in to whisper a comment about a passing tourist, I felt a jolt of electricity that made my skin hum. We returned to the suite for dinner. Alexander had ordered a simple meal, pasta, wine, and a salad. No silver domes, no white glove service. He poured the wine, his movements graceful and unhurried. He was watching me with an intensity that made the air in the room feel thick. The consultant was gone. The steward was gone. There was just the man who had seen me at my worst and decided I was his best. "You're very quiet tonight, CEO Sterling," he murmured, setting the bottle down. "I'm just realizing that the slow burn is a lot more dangerous than the fire," I admitted, taking a sip of the wine. When things are moving fast, you don't have time to feel the heat. But now, I can feel every degree. Alexander stood up and walked around the table. He didn't pull me into his lap. He didn't pin me against the wall. He just stood behind my chair, his hands resting on my shoulders. His touch was light, but it felt like a brand. "That's the point, Maya," he whispered, his lips grazing my ear. "I want you to feel everything. I want you to know that I'm not here because of a contract. I'm here because I can't imagine breathing without the scent of jasmine." He slid his hands down my arms, his fingers interlacing with mine. He pulled me to my feet and turned me to face him. The candlelight danced in his eyes, making them look like molten silver. "No more rescue missions," he said, his voice dropping to a low, seductive rasp. "No more secrets, just a man and his wife in a room that belongs to them." He kissed me, a slow, deep, and agonizingly tender kiss that tasted of the wine and the future. It was a kiss of courtship, a reclaiming of the intimacy we had shared in the dark. I reached for the buttons of his sweater, my hands steady. The slow burn was reaching its peak. I wanted him, not the billionaire, not the hero. I wanted the man who had tried to run away with a backpack full of comic books. Alexander POV. The physical connection was a language we both spoke fluently, but tonight the dialect had changed. As I led Maya toward the bedroom, I felt a sense of reverence that I had never known. For years, I had treated sex like another form of dominance, a way to secure an asset or manage a desire. But with Maya, in the quiet of this Swiss night, it was a surrender. I laid her on the bed, the moonlight casting her in silver and shadow. She looked like a masterpiece, dark hair spilled across the white pillows, her eyes wide and searching. I moved over her, my weight a promise of the devotion I had vowed. "I love you," I whispered, the words no longer a vulnerability but a foundation. "I know," she breathed, her hands sliding up my chest to my neck. "And I love you, Alexander." The intimacy that followed was slow, sensory, and absolute. I touched her with a precision that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with the heart. I kissed every inch of her skin, tracing the history of the woman who had conquered the Titan. In the dark, surrounded by the silence of the city, we finally found the balance we had been fighting for since the gala. We weren't the Sterling Blackwood scandal. We weren't the headlines. We were just us. As I finally fell asleep in her arms, I realized that the slow burn was the only fire that mattered. It was the one that didn't destroy. It was the one that built. Maya POV, 4 a.m. The room was cool, the air smelling of pine and our shared heat. Alexander was asleep, his arm draped across my waist in that familiar, protective grip. I stayed awake for a moment, watching the shadows on the ceiling. The peace was real. The love was real. But as I looked at the wooden box on the table in the other room, I felt a tug of the old sterling fire. Clara Vance, the fourth partner, why had she waited 30 years? Why had she kept the prototype? And what did she mean by the heart? I carefully disentangled myself from Alexander and got out of bed. I pulled on my robe and walked into the living room. The box was sitting there, a silent witness to the ghosts of our past. I picked up the photograph again. I looked at the woman in the middle, my aunt. She was smiling, but there was a look in her eyes that I recognized. It was the look of someone who knew the price of the science. I looked at the back of the photo. There was a single line of faded ink that I hadn't seen before. "The map is for the mind. The prototype is for the soul. Don't let them turn the soul into a secret." "You can't sleep either," a voice said from the doorway. I turned. Alexander was standing there, wearing only his trousers, his chest bare. He looked like the man from the warehouse, focused, lethal, and ready. I was just looking at the photo, I said. Alexander, what if Clara is the reason my father never launched? What if she's the one who convinced him that the sovereign protocol was a mistake? Then she's the most important person in this story, Alexander said, walking toward me. He took the photo from my hand and looked at it. My father was a thief, Maya. Eris was a traitor. But this woman, she looks like someone who chose to walk away. And just like you. Just like me. He pulled me into his arms, his chin resting on the top of my head. We go to Verzaska tomorrow, we find the heart, and then we decide what to do with the soul. And the slow burn, I asked, looking up at him. The slow burn never ends, Maya, he whispered, his mouth finding mine. It just gets hotter. Alexander POV morning. The drive to the Verzaska Valley was a descent into the raw, wild beauty of southern Switzerland. We had left the Bentley in Zurich and taken a rugged SUV. Marcus was following in a secondary vehicle, but he stayed 2 miles back. Alexander was driving, his hand in mine. We were locked into the mission, but the atmosphere was different. We were no longer fighting for our lives, we were fighting for the truth. The valley was a gorge of green water and white stone. We wound our way through the narrow roads, the mountains rising up on either side like the walls of a cathedral. The letter said the village of Lavertezzo, Maya said, her eyes fixed on the map, near the bridge of the jump. We reached the village, a cluster of stone houses that looked like they had grown out of the rock itself. It was quiet, the only sound the roar of the river below. We parked the car and walked toward the ancient stone bridge. A woman was sitting on a bench overlooking the water. She was older now, her hair the color of the mountain mist, but her eyes were unmistakable. They were the eyes from the photograph. Aunt Clara, Maya whispered. The woman turned. She didn't look surprised. She looked like she had been waiting for 30 years for this exact moment. You have your mother's smile, Maya, the woman said, her voice a soft, melodic rasp. And you have your father's fire. She looked at me, her gaze sweeping over me with a clinical, soul-crushing intensity that reminded me of my mother. And you must be the Blackwood boy, the one who realized the room was empty. I'm Alexander, I said, stepping forward. I know who you are, Alexander. I've been watching the news from New York to Zurich. You did well. You released the map. Clara stood up, her movements graceful despite her age. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small copper device. It looked like a pocket watch, but it hummed with a low-frequency vibration that I could feel in my teeth. The mapping releases the data, Clara said, her eyes fixed on Maya. But this is the heart. It's the original interface your father built before he met Arthur Blackwood. It doesn't read the brain, Maya. It connects the soul. Connects it to what? Maya asked. To the person sitting across from you. It's the ultimate bridge. The one that requires no code, no encryption, and no locked-in contract. It only requires honesty. Clara handed the device to Maya. The fourth factor wasn't a flaw, Maya. It was a safeguard. Your father knew that in the wrong hands, the map would be a weapon. So he built the heart to ensure that the science could only be used by those who were brave enough to be real. The room, the world, felt suddenly very small. Maya looked at the device, then at me. I saw the realization in her eyes. The slow burn of the last 2 days hadn't just been a courtship. It had been the preparation for this moment. Are you ready, Alexander? Maya asked, her voice trembling. I've been ready since the gala, I said. Clara smiled, a slow, beautiful, and incredibly sad expression. Then use it, finish the map, and show the world that the sterling legacy isn't about power. It's about the truth of being human. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the stone village. Maya POV. We sat on the edge of the river, the turquoise water rushing past us. The copper device sat between us on a flat rock. It was humming, a rhythmic, pulsing sound that seemed to synchronize with my own heartbeat. "We don't have to do it," Alexander said, his hand hovering over mine. "We have the love, we have the trust. We don't need a machine to prove it." "It's not a machine, Alexander," I said, looking at him. "It's a legacy. It's the reason my father died. He wanted us to have this. He wanted the fourth partner to have the last word." I reached out and touched the device. Alexander did the same. The connection was instantaneous. It wasn't a mapping of data. It wasn't a transfer of code. It was a flood of emotion, a raw, unshielded tide of everything Alexander felt for me and everything I felt for him. I saw his childhood loneliness, his fear of his mother, his absolute, agonizing devotion to me. I felt the moment he decided to resign, the moment he decided to take the fall, the moment he realized he was free, and he felt me. He felt my desperation, my fire, my love for my father, and the terrifying, beautiful way I had fallen for the man who tried to cage me. We sat there for a long time, the world vanishing around us. There were no titles. There was no company. There was only the truth. The slow burn was over. The fire was out. We were finally truly whole. Alexander POV. End of chapter 47. I pulled back, my eyes burning with tears I didn't want to hide. I looked at Maya. She was glowing, her face radiant with a clarity that no science could ever replicate. "The heart," I whispered. "The heart," she agreed. The fourth partner had given us the final piece of the puzzle. The sterling legacy wasn't a corporate asset. It was a human connection. I picked up the copper device and handed it to Maya. "What do we do with it?" "We keep it," she said, her eyes flashing with that familiar fire. "We keep it as a reminder, and we use the foundation to ensure that every person in the world has the chance to find their own heart." We stood up and walked back toward the car. The sun was setting over the Verzaska Valley, the mountains turning to pillars of violet and gold. The claim was ours. The future was waiting. And as I leaned down to kiss my wife, I realized that the locked-in era had finally, truly ended. We were free. And we were finally, perfectly together. Next chapter, chapter 48, his soft side.